Martha Edwards hadn't planned to be anywhere near Riverdale's most infamous biker bar that evening. But as her old Buick coughed, clunked, and rolled to a dead stop right in front of it, with steam hissing out from under the hood, she found herself in exactly the place she'd spent her life avoiding. And what happened next? It left her speechless, in tears, and would go on to ripple through the community in ways nobody could have guessed. Hey friends, welcome back to Tales Unveiled. This one's a little unexpected. So let's dive in. Martha was 67 years old, a widow and a retired second-grade teacher who had spent 4 full decades molding young minds at Riverdale Elementary. While many of her retired colleagues had headed south to chase sunshine or golf courses, Martha stayed. Riverdale was home. Every street corner, every pothole, every faded mural held a piece of her story with her late husband, Frank. Thursdays were sacred. For the last several years, Martha spent her evenings volunteering at the local community center's food bank. And after helping distribute canned goods and groceries, she'd take the same familiar route home. Always the same streets. Always safe. Always predictable. But tonight, that route was under construction. Main Street was blocked off, and she had no choice but to take a detour, one that crept just a little too close to the edge of town where most folks didn't linger after dark. It's fine, she had told herself, hands gripping the wheel as she double-checked the map app earlier that evening. Just a few extra blocks. I'll be through before I know it. And that plan would have worked if her car hadn't suddenly betrayed her. The temperature gauge surged into the red. A hideous grinding noise echoed from under the hood. And then came the steam, thick and white, like a ghost rising from her engine. The Buick gasped its last breath and died, right in front of the Iron Horse. Now, for those of you not from Riverdale, let's be clear. The Iron Horse was not the kind of place Martha Edwards would have chosen to break down in front of. The stories were legendary. Brawls that spilled into the street, roaring motorcycles at all hours, rumors of illegal dealings, an atmosphere that made even police patrols wary. The local paper only ever mentioned the place with words like notorious, rough, or avoid. Inside her car, Martha reached for her phone, fingers trembling. Dead. Of course. She remembered too late. She'd meant to charge it while helping an elderly man carry his groceries earlier at the food bank. She'd been too busy being kind. Now she was stuck. Alone. Night falling fast. Her only company. The hum of hard rock music leaking through the bar's grimy windows. The occasional flash of silhouettes moving inside. And the chilling knowledge that this road wasn't a shortcut. It was a dead end. The only reason anyone came down it was to go to the bar. Martha took a deep breath. Maybe someone will drive by, she muttered. But the words barely escaped her lips before the front door of the Iron Horse creaked open. Loud music spilled out, followed by 3 large men, leather vests, shaggy beards, tattoos glinting in the dim light. One of them pointed directly at her car. Then all 3 started walking toward her. Her heart thundered. She quickly checked the locks on her doors, then scolded herself. What good were locked doors if someone really wanted in? A firm tap on her window made her jump. The biggest of the 3 men stood outside her window, eyebrows raised, gesturing politely for her to roll it down. "You okay in there, ma'am?" he asked through the glass. Martha hesitated. Then, cautiously, she lowered the window, just an inch. "My car, it broke down," she said. Her voice trembled. "My phone's dead. I was trying to figure out what to do." The man nodded, his gaze flicking to the steam still rising from the hood. "Mind if I take a look? I know a thing or two about engines." Before she could answer, the second man, this one younger, with neatly trimmed facial hair and warm, kind eyes, stepped into view. Something about him, maybe the way he carried himself, reminded Martha of Frank. "Ray here's the best mechanic in town," the younger one said. "Built half the bikes parked out front with his own hands." Martha hesitated, then gave a small nod. "That would be very kind. Thank you." She pulled the hood release and slowly stepped out of the car. Up close, the 3 men were even more imposing. Broad shoulders, biker patches, the unmistakable logo of the Iron Horseman MC embroidered across their backs, just like in all the rumors. But Ray was already under the hood, his hands moving swiftly. blown radiator hose, he declared after a moment. Common in these older models. Easy enough to patch, but you'll want to replace it soon. Can you fix it? She asked, standing awkwardly to the side. Sure can. He grinned, surprisingly gentle. I've got what I need in my truck. Bobby, he turned to the youngest of the trio, can you grab my toolbox from inside and see if Mike has any radiator fluid? Bobby nodded and jogged toward the bar. Ray turned back to Martha. Should have you back on the road in 20 minutes, ma'am. I'm Ray Davis, by the way. Martha Edwards, she replied, reaching out tentatively to shake his grease-stained hand. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Just Ray. He gestured toward the third man. That's Tom. Tom nodded politely. The bar door opened again, and to Martha's growing anxiety, a whole group of people began to pour out onto the sidewalk. Dozens of them, men and women alike, all clad in similar leather vests or biker jackets. She instinctively took a step back. Her instinct screamed to run. Ray noticed and chuckled. Don't worry, Mrs. Edwards. Word spreads fast around here. Everyone's just coming to help. Got the toolbox? Bobby called, returning with a red case. Behind him, another man, bald and stocky, carried a jug of radiator fluid. Perfect timing, Mike. Ray said, Everyone, this is Mrs. Edwards. Her car needs a little TLC. To Martha's astonishment, the group immediately formed what looked like a well-oiled pit crew. Work lights appeared out of nowhere. Tools were unpacked with precision. A woman about Martha's age appeared with a folding chair and a warm smile. No sense standing while they work, she said, setting up the chair. I'm Darlene, Ray's better half. Want something to drink, hon? Water? Coffee? We've got a fresh pot. Water would be lovely, Martha said, still in a daze. As Darlene headed inside, Martha eased into the chair. She watched as Ray and the others worked seamlessly, like a NASCAR pit stop, but with motorcycles and classic rock playing in the background. And slowly, her fear began to fade. Just then, another woman, silver-haired with a long braid, sat down beside her with a water bottle in hand. First time at the horse, huh? She said with a knowing grin. Martha gave a quiet laugh. Is it that obvious? The woman smiled. I'm Carol. Been riding with a horseman for 20 years. Most folks think they know who we are, but they don't. I'm starting to realize that, Martha said honestly. Carol nodded. Ray works at the Harley dealership during the day. Bobby's a nurse at County General. Me? I retired from teaching at Riverdale High just last year. Martha blinked. You were a teacher? For decades. What about you? I taught second grade at Riverdale Elementary. Carol's face lit up. You're that Mrs. Edwards? My son, Jason, had you back in '98. Scrawny kid. Loved books. Jason Reynolds? Martha's eyes widened. He wrote that beautiful poem about his granddad's farm. Won the county writing contest. Carol grinned. That's him. And just like that, something shifted. The biker bar wasn't scary anymore. It was just people, neighbors, parents, teachers. People who'd once sat across tiny desks in Martha's classroom. And that's where we'll pause. As Martha and Carol caught up, sharing memories of school field trips, PTA meetings, and old classroom pets, the chaos around her car had taken on an oddly comforting rhythm. The roar of motorcycles had been replaced with the soft hum of classic rock and the occasional clink of a wrench against metal. Almost done, Mrs. Edwards, Ray called out, wiping his hands on a well-used rag. Just letting the engine cool a little before we seal everything up. Should be ready to roll in about 10 minutes. Martha turned back to Carol, overwhelmed by the kindness she'd received. I really can't thank you all enough, she said, her voice sincere. I didn't know what I would have done if... Her sentence trailed off as a sudden burst of commotion near the bar's entrance caught her attention. A young woman hurried toward them, phone in hand, her face tight with worry. She went straight to Ray, who took the phone and stepped away from the group to speak in hushed tones. Martha watched uneasy as Ray's expression shifted. Even from a distance, the concern was plain. His brow furrowed, shoulders stiffening as he listened. He said a few short words, handed the phone back, and took a moment to collect himself before returning to the car. "Everything okay?" Bobby asked him quietly. Ray gave a short nod. "Yeah, just a little fever. Lisa's got it under control." His voice was calm, but the strain beneath it was unmistakable. "Let's wrap this up so Mrs. Edwards can get home." Within minutes, they were done. The radiator hose had been patched securely, the fluid topped off, and the car once again hummed with life. "This'll get you home safely," Ray said, closing the hood with a solid thunk. "But you'll want to get that hose replaced soon. Old ones like that tend to go out all at once." Martha looked at him, eyes welling slightly. "I don't know how to thank you. You were all so generous with your time, your tools. Please, let me pay you for the parts at least." Ray shook his head immediately. "No way. Wouldn't dream of it. Just glad we could help." "Well, then let me at least make a donation to your club. Something. You saved me tonight." He smiled, softer this time. "Tell you what, ma'am, next time you're at that food bank, help someone who's having a rough day. That's more than enough for us." Martha opened her purse and scribbled her phone number on a small notepad. "In case you ever need anything," she said, handing it to him. "It's the least I can do." Ray took it with a quiet nod of appreciation. As she climbed into her car, she glanced back at the crowd still lingering around the Iron Horse. Carol waved. Darlene smiled and gave her a thumbs up. And the group of bikers stood like a quiet honor guard, making sure she drove off safe. It wasn't until she turned onto her street that Martha fully let out the breath she'd been holding. The shock of the night had faded, replaced by something else: admiration, curiosity, and a gnawing ache over what Carol had said about little Mike. She couldn't stop thinking about him. An 8-year-old boy fighting leukemia. A family stretched thin to cover treatment. A grandfather holding everything together with grease-stained hands and quiet grit. By the time she pulled into her driveway, Martha had made a decision. The next morning, she was in her church's office, seated across from Pastor Jim. "I'm telling you, Jim," she said firmly, "they were nothing like what we've heard. They helped me, without hesitation, without judgment. And now they're going through something terrible with that little boy." Pastor Jim leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. He was used to Martha's passion. She'd been a pillar of the church for years. But this was new. "I don't doubt your experience, Martha," he said carefully. "But the Iron Horse has a reputation. You've seen the news stories. There have been incidents." "Maybe," she acknowledged. "But the people I met last night were kind. They were decent. And they were doing exactly what we preach about every Sunday, helping a stranger in need, no questions asked." Pastor Jim sighed. She had him there. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "A fundraiser," she said, already a step ahead. "For little Mike's treatment. The church has the space, the resources. We can pull it together in 2 weeks. Enough time to spread the word and still meet their deadline for that new treatment." That same afternoon, Martha rallied a small team of volunteers. Some were eager, others not so much. "I'm not sure we should be raising money for people connected to that bar," her friend Eleanor said, frowning over her glasses. Martha didn't budge. "If you'd seen their faces when they talked about that boy, you wouldn't be asking that. They're just a family trying to save their child. No different than any of us would be." Reluctantly, Eleanor agreed. Over the next few days, Martha threw herself into the work with the same tenacity she'd once poured into school plays and spelling bees. She organized a silent auction, called every bakery in town for donations, and visited local businesses with a donation jar in one hand and photos of Lil Mike in the other. By the end of the week, everything was coming together beautifully, except for one thing. "I haven't told them yet," she confessed to Pastor Jim during a planning meeting. "I'm worried they'll refuse to help. Out of pride." He gave her a long look. "Then you need to go tell them. This isn't just about money. It's about community, about building bridges." Martha nodded. She knew he was right. That evening, just after sunset, she found herself pulling into the same parking spot outside the Iron Horse. Only this time, her hands didn't tremble as she turned off the ignition. The bar looked different now. less threatening, almost familiar, still lined with motorcycles, but bathed in the warm glow of early evening. Inside, the place surprised her even more. Rather than a dark, smoky dive, it was clean and surprisingly inviting. A polished wooden bar ran the length of the room. Vintage motorcycle photos lined the walls. A small stage hinted at live music nights. The lighting was warm, the music classic rock at a modest volume. Several heads turned when she walked in. She definitely stood out, silver hair, neat cardigan, clutching her purse like a lifeline. But a familiar face broke the tension. Mrs. Edwards? Carol called from a table near the back. What brings you back to our humble establishment? Car trouble again. Martha smiled and made her way over. Thankfully not. I was hoping to find Ray. Is he around? In the office, Carol said, standing. I'll grab him. Martha took a seat, trying not to notice the curious glances from the other patrons. A moment later, Ray appeared, looking both surprised and a little worried. Mrs. Edwards, everything okay with your car? The car's fine, Martha assured him. I came to talk to you. Privately, if you have a moment. Ray's brows furrowed, but he nodded. He led her to a booth in the back, away from the others. Everything all right? He asked again. Yes, she said gently. Actually, I want to talk to you about little Mike. Ray tensed instantly. His posture shifted. What about him? I heard he needs a treatment. Something experimental. Insurance won't cover it, and your family's short on funds. Ray's jaw clenched. With all due respect, ma'am, that's a private family matter. Who told you? It doesn't matter, Martha said kindly. What matters is that we want to help. Our church is organizing a fundraiser. Everything's already in motion. Silent auction, bake sale, donation drive. It's happening next Saturday. Ray was silent. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, controlled. I appreciate the gesture, Mrs. Edwards, but we don't need charity. We take care of our own. It's not charity, Martha replied firmly. It's community. You helped me when I was stranded, no questions asked. This is me returning the favor. That's how it's supposed to work. Ray stared at her, struggling. You don't even know us. I know enough, she said softly. I know you're a grandfather who loves his grandson. I know you're the kind of man who stops for a stranger. That tells me everything I need to know. Ray looked away. It's a lot of money, he murmured. It's only money, she countered. And there's plenty of it in this town. People just need a reason to share it. After long silence, Ray nodded, slowly. All right, for little Mike, I'll accept the help. But I want the club to pitch in too. We'll provide security, help with setup, cleanup, whatever you need. Martha smiled, deeply touched. Then, an idea that had been sitting in the back of her mind suddenly took shape. What would you think, she asked, about hosting the fundraiser here, at the Iron Horse? Ray's eyebrows shot up. Here? You want to bring your church group to a biker bar? Why not? She said simply. It would mean something. Two worlds coming together for a good cause. And maybe, just maybe, people would finally see this place and its people for what they really are. Ray didn't answer right away. He leaned back against the booth, arms crossed, thinking. The idea clearly caught him off guard. Hosting a church fundraiser at the Iron Horse? It was about as far from conventional as it got. But the more he thought about it, the more his skeptical expression softened into something resembling amusement. You really think your church folks would come to a place like this? He asked, eyebrow raised. They'll come, Martha replied confidently, because I'll be the one inviting them, and because they'll know why we're doing it. Ray let out a low chuckle, shaking his head in disbelief. You're something else, Mrs. Edwards. She smiled. So is that a yes? A beat passed. Then Ray nodded once, firmly. Yeah, it's a yes. We'll clean the place up, make it nice. If it helps little Mike, we're in. And just like that, the gears were in motion. The following 2 weeks flew by in a whirlwind of planning, prepping, and persuading. Word spread quickly. partly thanks to Martha's reputation around town, and partly because of the unexpected venue. The whispers traveled through pews and PDA groups alike. Did you hear? The fundraiser's going to be at the biker bar. Wait, the Iron Horse. Is this a joke? But Martha never flinched. She knocked on every door, called every contact, smiled through every doubtful stare. It's not about where, she said again and again. It's about who. It's about that little boy. Meanwhile, at the Iron Horse, the transformation began. Ray and the crew worked overtime scrubbing floors, wiping down tables, replacing burned-out lights, and organizing the layout to make space for auction tables and food stations. Darlene took charge of decorations, and Bobby, when not working hospital shifts, designed handmade signs and flyers that would rival any school carnival. When the big day finally arrived, the bar didn't look like a bar at all. Colorful streamers and banners fluttered from the rafters. Tables were stacked with donated items, from handmade quilts to restaurant gift cards, even a shiny red bike that gleamed near the entrance. The smell of barbecue and fresh-baked cookies filled the air, and the buzz of anticipation was electric. At first, the church crowd came in cautiously. You could spot them easily. Men in slacks and button-down shirts, women in floral dresses with purses clutched tightly. Their steps slowed as they entered, eyes scanning the leather vests and tattooed arms. But they came, and one by one, the barriers started to crumble. It helped that Carol was the first to greet them, Martha at her side. "Welcome," she said with warmth, her long braid tied with a ribbon for the occasion. "Grab a bidding sheet and help yourself to the coffee. Stronger stuff's behind the bar if you change your mind later." Laughter broke the ice, and from there it blossomed. Carol and Eleanor, the one skeptical friend, discovered they both loved quilting and spent nearly 30 minutes geeking out over thread weights and stitch patterns. Tom, one of the original trio who had helped Martha with her car, ended up in a deep conversation with Pastor Jim. As it turned out, both were Vietnam veterans. Before long, they'd taken over a booth in the corner, swapping stories over paper cups of sweet tea. And then came the real guest of honor, little Mike. He arrived mid-afternoon, pushed in a wheelchair by his mom, Lisa, his skinny frame wrapped in a superhero hoodie, eyes bright with curiosity. The crowd turned as he entered, and an unexpected hush fell over the room. Not a pity, but a pure admiration. He was brave, radiant. He asked thoughtful questions about the model motorcycle on display. He made a point to thank every person who handed him a cookie or offered him a hug. The boy had the soft smile of someone who didn't fully understand how hard life had already hit him, but carried on anyway. "He's got Ray's eyes," Martha murmured to Darlene as they watched him from across the room. "And his stubborn streak," Darlene agreed with a chuckle. "Won't quit, ever." By nightfall, the bidding tables were nearly empty, every item claimed. The bake sale had sold out twice. Donation jars overflowed. And when the final count came in, the number left everyone stunned. $11,973. Far more than the $8,000 goal they'd hoped for. Ray stood frozen for a moment, blinking hard. Then he cleared his throat, obviously trying to hold it together. This is going to help get him into the treatment," he said, quietly, voice cracking. The crowd applauded. Some cheered. A few cried. But Martha? She just smiled. She'd known this town had it in them all along. Later that night, as the last of the guests filed out and the bikers rolled up their sleeves for cleanup, Ray found her sitting at the bar with a cup of coffee, looking tired but content. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice rough. "You already did," she replied. "That night outside this very place, when my car died and you all stepped up. Tonight was just me returning the favor." Ray shook his head in amazement. "When you broke down out front, I thought you were going to have a heart attack just seeing us. Never thought we'd end up here." Martha chuckled softly. Life has a funny way of working itself out. Sometimes a breakdown takes you right where you need to be. From that night on, everything changed. The fundraiser became a yearly tradition, each year helping a different child facing medical hardship. And each year, it was held right there at the Iron Horse. Martha became a regular. Sometimes she stopped by with a tray of cookies, other times just to say hello. The bar patrons had gotten used to her presence, and soon enough, they stopped calling her Mrs. Edwards and just called her Martha. Even the bar changed. The atmosphere shifted. Word spread about the club's kindness, and the old rumors slowly faded. New customers started showing up, not thrill seekers or rebels, but neighbors curious to meet the people behind the miracle. And one afternoon, nearly a year to the day after her old Buick had sputtered to a halt, Martha was called back to the bar. She walked in to find the whole crew waiting. Ray, Darlene, Bobby, Carol, Tom, and a dozen others. Ray held out a small box. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Open it," Darlene said with a grin. Inside was a custom leather vest. Not black like theirs, but a soft brown. On the back, a patch embroidered in gold thread read, "Honorary Iron Horse, Martha, Teacher, Edwards." Tears welled in her eyes. She wore that vest to every fundraiser afterward. Stood shoulder to shoulder with the bikers, not as an outsider, but as family. But maybe the biggest change of all wasn't at the bar. It was in Riverdale itself. Walls that had once divided the town, between respectable folks and the people from the wrong side of the tracks, began to dissolve. People started talking to neighbors they'd once ignored. Teachers, nurses, mechanics, pastors, they all started to realize they had more in common than they'd ever imagined. And it all started because a car broke down, at exactly the right time, in exactly the right place. The year following the first fundraiser flew by, but its effects didn't fade. If anything, the event had created ripples, deep, lasting ones that kept widening. In the month that followed, Martha noticed something remarkable happening around town. People who had never stepped foot near the Iron Horse began to wave at its members on the street. Local businesses that once dismissed the biker club as troublemakers now donated gift cards and raffle items without hesitation. Even the mayor made a brief visit during one of their Saturday pancake breakfasts. The walls were coming down. And as for Martha, she was no longer just a retired schoolteacher. She had become something more. A bridge, a symbol, the woman who walked easily between two worlds. Her honorary vest was more than just a token. She wore it often, not to make a statement, but because it felt like it belonged. The brown leather softened over time, and the golden thread of her nickname caught the light in just the right way whenever she visited the bar. She became, unofficially, the heart of the Iron Horseman. Ray, for all his gruffness, seemed a little more open these days. The man who once bristled at the thought of accepting help had become a kind of quiet leader in his own right. Someone the others looked to, not just for mechanical know-how, but for wisdom and calm. Little Mike's treatment, thanks to the fundraiser, had started on schedule. The results were promising. No miracle cures, not yet, but hope had returned to the family. And with it, strength. Martha visited him sometimes, always bearing a new book or puzzle. Teacher things, she called them. He'd taken a liking to graphic novels and had started writing his own. His latest creation featured a leather-jacketed superhero named the Wrench, who bore more than a passing resemblance to his grandfather. Lisa, Mike's mom, had warmed up to Martha too. At first, she'd been a bit overwhelmed by the sudden outpouring of support, but over time, she saw what everyone else did. Martha wasn't looking for recognition. She was simply doing what she'd always done, lifting others up one person at a time. Then came the spring. The community center where Martha still volunteered was in need of serious repairs. A leaking roof, outdated plumbing, peeling paint. It had become too much for the aging board of directors to handle alone. When Martha mentioned it in passing one evening at the bar, Ray didn't hesitate. "We can help." The next weekend, the Iron Horsemen showed up en masse, armed with ladders, paintbrushes, drills, and a truckload of good intentions. It wasn't just a cleanup. It was a transformation. Within days, the place was renewed. The leaking roof was patched. The walls repainted. Even the bathrooms got a fresh upgrade. "Looks better than when it opened," the center's director joked. Word spread fast again. People couldn't ignore it anymore. This club, once whispered about in gas stations and grocery stores, had become one of Riverdale's most reliable forces for good. Eventually, local media caught wind of the story. A small column in the Riverdale Gazette turned into a photo feature, then a human interest segment on the regional news. Soon, people from neighboring towns were asking, "Who are the Iron Horsemen, and what's their deal?" Martha chuckled every time someone asked her that. "They're just people," she'd say. "The kind who know how to use a wrench and how to show up when it matters." She never used the word heroes. She didn't need to. One evening in early summer, as the sun dipped low and bathed Riverdale in that soft golden glow, Martha sat with Ray, Darlene, and Carol on the bar's back patio. Bobby had just finished flipping burgers for a club cookout, and laughter echoed across the lot. "I never thought I'd be here," Martha said, sipping lemonade from a red plastic cup. "Neither did we," Darlene admitted with a grin. "You surprised us." Ray looked at her, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You changed the whole town, Mrs. Edwards." Martha waved the comment away. "I didn't change anything. I just showed up like you did for me." Carol raised her cup to showing up. Everyone else followed suit to showing up. That became something of a motto for them after that. Not flashy, not dramatic, just honest. Show up, be there, do good. Simple but powerful. By the following fall, the club had launched something new, a scholarship fund in Lil Mike's name for kids in Riverdale who wanted to pursue careers in mechanics, nursing, or education, the very fields represented by their own members. And Martha? She was right in the middle of it all, hosting meetings, reviewing essays, and insisting on proper grammar in the thank you letters. One afternoon, while organizing donations for the second annual Lil Mike fundraiser, Martha received a letter. No return address. Just her name on the envelope in delicate, looping handwriting. She opened it carefully and read, "Dear Mrs. Edwards, you don't know me, but I heard about what you did. My son was diagnosed with leukemia 2 months ago. We're scared, overwhelmed, and honestly not sure how we're going to afford everything. But someone at the clinic mentioned your story, the fundraiser, the bar, the bikers. It gave me hope. I just want to say thank you, not for the money, for the example. You reminded me that good people are still out there, with gratitude, a mother who's still fighting." Martha sat in silence for a long moment. Then, quietly, she folded the letter, slipped it into her vest pocket, and returned to work, because there was always more to do, more people to help, more lives to touch. And as long as she could, she'd keep showing up. By the time the third Lil Mike fundraiser rolled around, Riverdale had changed in ways no one could have imagined just a few years earlier. There were no more hush warnings about that bar on the edge of town. No more suspicious glances cast at men in leather vests or tattooed arms filling gas tanks. The Iron Horseman had earned something far more valuable than reputation, trust. And at the center of it all was Martha Edwards. Not because she'd planned it. Not because she was some kind of activist, but simply because she believed in doing the right thing, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it challenged everything she thought she knew. On the morning of the third fundraiser, Martha stood inside the Iron Horse, clipboard in hand, surrounded by chaos, in the best sense of the word. Carol was directing volunteers like a drill sergeant. Bobby was adjusting the PA system for the guest speakers. And Tom was setting up tables loaded with raffle prizes, while Ray taped off a section of the parking lot for kids' activities. It looked nothing like a biker bar. It looked like a community fair. A local bakery had donated 3-tiered cakes shaped like motorcycles. The Riverdale High Jazz Band had volunteered to play for free. A police officer and a biker ran the dunk tank together, taking turns getting soaked by grinning kids. And little Mike? He wasn't so little anymore. Now 10 years old, his hair had started to grow back, and his voice carried more confidence than ever. He stood behind a lemonade stand, taking donations and giving everyone a bright, toothy grin. Martha watched him hand a cup to an elderly man and say, "Thank you for helping kids like me." That moment, so simple, so sincere, made everything worth it. Around 6 p.m., Martha stood on the small stage set up near the back lot. She wore her honorary vest, a microphone in one hand and her notes in the other, but she barely looked at the paper. "I know many of you came here tonight for the first time," she began, smiling out at the crowd of familiar and unfamiliar faces. "Some of you still can't believe this event is happening at a biker bar. I understand. I didn't believe it either, until my car broke down right out front. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but was warm, affectionate. That night changed everything for me, she continued. Not just because I got my car fixed, but because I was reminded very clearly that kindness doesn't always wear a suit or carry a Bible. Sometimes it rides a Harley and wears a vest full of patches. More chuckles, nods, and what started as one moment of unexpected help has become something so much bigger than any of us. It's become a tradition, a movement, a reminder that community doesn't depend on where you gather, but how you treat each other once you do. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was steady, lasting. Ray joined her on stage, then visibly moved. He didn't say much, just placed a hand on her shoulder and gave her a rare smile that said it all. Together, they announced the night's total, $15,426. It would cover treatment costs for a 5-year-old girl named Amelia, recently diagnosed with rare bone cancer. Her parents had driven 3 hours to attend. When they heard the number, they both wept that night. After the guests had gone and the cleanup had begun, Martha sat at the edge of the now empty stage, watching the final few volunteers gather boxes and fold tablecloths. She felt the ache of her feet, the weight in her knees, but her heart was light. Ray walked over with 2 cups of coffee, one for her, one for him. No cream, just the way she liked it. You ever think, he asked, lowering himself beside her, about what might have happened if your car hadn't broken down that night? Martha smiled. All the time. And I think God knew exactly where I needed to stop, she said simply. He nodded, sipping. Funny how life works. She looked around at the Iron Horse, now glowing in the twilight with string lights and laughter still hanging in the air. Not funny, she said. Beautiful. Months passed, then a year, then another, and the fundraisers continued. Each one a little bigger, a little more organized, a little more surprising in the lives they touched. Martha, now pushing 70, showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, she seemed energized by the mission. Her house had turned into headquarters every spring, with auction items stacked in her garage and sign-up sheets covering her kitchen table. People began to refer to her, half-jokingly, as the Mayor of Kindness. Even little Mike, now a middle schooler, took to calling her Grammy Martha, a nickname that stuck far beyond just his family. But one day, a surprise came not in the form of a thank you note or donation, but an invitation. It arrived in the mail with an official seal, a community recognition award from the state capitol. She'd been nominated by a coalition of civic groups and voted unanimously by the board. The event would be held in a grand old hall 2 hours away. At first, Martha tried to decline. I don't need a plaque to keep doing what I'm doing, she told Ray. We know, he replied, but you deserve one anyway. The whole club went with her, leather jackets cleaned and shined, boots polished, every one of them seated in neat rows as the announcer read her name. She walked across that stage, not just as a teacher or volunteer, but as a bridge between 2 worlds, as a woman who'd turned a breakdown into a mission, a stranger into a family. And when the MC handed her the plaque, he asked her if she wanted to say a few words. She took the mic. No notes this time. No speech prepared. I just want to say thank you, she began, for believing in people, for trusting that kindness is contagious. Then, with a small laugh, she added, and if your car ever breaks down in front of a biker bar, don't panic. Just roll down your window and say hello. The whole room laughed and applauded, and the Iron Horseman whistled loud enough to rattle the chandeliers. Years later, the Iron Horse fundraiser had grown so big it moved outdoors to a city park. But the heart of it never changed. There were still handmade auction signs, still Little Mike's superhero comics for sale, still Martha in her honorary vest greeting each person like they were an old friend. By then, she was a living legend in Riverdale. But if you asked her what she was most proud of, she'd tell you it wasn't the awards or the plaques or the articles written about her. It was the small things. A mother who had hope again. A child who smiled through pain. A stranger who became family. All because one Thursday night, On a forgotten street in a forgotten part of town, a car broke down in front of the last place Martha Edwards ever expected to find Grace. And it turned out it was exactly where Grace had been waiting all along. If you loved this story, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming tales just like this. And hey, if you've ever experienced a moment where a stranger showed up when you needed it most, share it in the comments. You never know who it might inspire. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Yellowheart.